In the first video, I talked about what top law schools are looking for when they read your application, and the answer that I provided was that they want you to be the best or one of the best at an area that they care about. Um, in this video, what I want to talk more about is how you become the best, how you become a top applicant. And probably the biggest area, the most important yet underappreciated area, is having the right mindset about the process, having the right attitude. And I think there are really three big areas in this mindset arena where um, the earlier and the more you can internalize them, the more likely you are to really emerge as a top applicant. Um, so number one is what I would call perspective. Um, and by perspective, what I mean is really understanding what's being measured in the law school admissions game and what isn't. And I think too often there's a tendency to think or imagine that when you're competing for a top spot at a law school, you're being judged on who you are as a person or how much you've achieved, or how intelligent you are, or how likely you are to be a good lawyer. And you know, the admissions process is obviously related to those kinds of things, but at the end of the day, when you really look objectively at what's being measured, you know, one has to realize that you're really only being judged on a set of small, finite, discrete things, and if you can really just get good at a small number of things, you're going to win the law school game. So you have to do well on the LSAT, you have to do well academically in school, and then you just have to provide some kind of value, show them that you're some kind of a person, so that you have some kind of achievement that the law school values. And that's all you have to do. You just have to focus on these areas. And when you realize that, you can have the right attitude about it, and you can block out all the distractions, all the negative thoughts, just all the things that aren't worth thinking about and stressing about. Number two is what I would call process orientation. And what I mean by process orientation is really coming to view the law school process, the admissions game, not as some chore that you just sort of have to do in order to get on to the next step, but really taking an interest in and enjoying every step of the journey. And I think there are a lot of advantages to doing this. One is obviously that the more you enjoy something, the more likely you are to be good at it. But I also actually think that having a process-oriented mindset is actually going to make you ultimately not only a better applicant, but also like legitimately someone who's going to be set up to succeed both as a law school student and ultimately in your profession. So I can give you an example with the LSAT, for example. I think one attitude is to say, oh, well, I just have to do well on this thing, and then that way I can get it out of the way and go on to the right law school. But the other, a more process-oriented approach would be to really enjoy the process of studying for the LSAT, really taking an intellectual curiosity in how the test is constructed, what are the things you have to learn, what are the skills you have to improve, how you can get better at it, almost treating it like a game. And I remember when I was taking the LSAT, the first time I took it, I scored quite badly at it. But I found it interesting, and I just began to treat it like a game or a sport or a skill. I sort of set up like an internal competition for myself. I worked on different areas that the test sort of was trying to get at. And as ridiculous as it sounds, I don't want to sort of downplay what I learned in law school, but as I really think about the whole process in its totality, although I don't obviously take LSAT tests anymore, I think that whole process of learning how to get good at it really actually dramatically changed how I think about the world, how I approach different questions. And as the cliche goes, thinking like a lawyer, I actually think I developed that much more in the course of studying for the LSAT than I did in anything else I did. And if you apply this process mentality to not only the LSAT, but every step of the journey, I think that's going to sort of take on a life of its own and just make you more a better applicant, and it'll just be a more enjoyable, easy process. And then the final mindset that I would emphasize is having a growth mentality, a growth mindset. And what I mean here is always sort of, while I think there are real sort of baseline levels of ability or intelligence or whatever that you probably need to have to get into a top school, I think the floor is actually not too high. I think if you take and adopt the mentality that every single part of the law school process, to some degree, is under your control, it's something that you can grow at, improve at, learn about, and just become better at, that's going to just, that's a really valuable mindset to have. And every time that you approach any part of it, even that might seem difficult, maybe you think you can't get an A in a certain class, maybe you think that the best you can do on the LSAT is a certain number, really challenge that assumption, adopt the mentality that if you work at it, if you learn about it, you can get better at. And I really do think that when you're looking at certain, when you compare getting into a top law school to many other competitions or activities or whatever, I really do think that the sort of genetic limitations or sort of the fixed kind of variables are surmountable. They can be overcome, and I've seen a lot of people with sort of not that remarkable ability really adopt the right mindset and get into a top school. And I've also seen some really brilliant people who I think would and maybe are going to be top tier legal professionals who just don't have this growth mindset, and therefore they don't learn how to navigate the process. So to summarize, in order to become a top applicant, I think mindset is really, really important. And the three that I would focus on is, number one, having perspective on the whole process, putting things in perspective and knowing what you're being judged on. Number two is process orientation, really enjoying, welcoming, taking an interest in the entire process as sort of an end in itself. And then the third area is having a growth mindset, really recognizing that every aspect of this game is something you can improve at, that it's a skill you can get better at, and that the more you learn, the more you can improve.